Business owners of Reddit. What's the most obnoxious reason an employee quit / had to be fired over? Pawn shop employee stole $400 from the cash register, then realized that there were video cameras. He had no idea where the security footage was stored, so in order to cover his tracks, he set the store on fire. He actually ended up getting pretty badly burned in the process and went to jail right after the hospital. We're kicking it off with an absolute banger. This is the pinnacle of you reap what you sow. Story 2. Had a guy who we hired who showed a lot of potential, sales. He was a little arrogant and had a good-sized ego, but wasn't enough of a problem. He was really good at sales and eventually it went to his head. He started showing up late all the time, leaving early, cutting corners where he could. The final straw came when he showed up late and someone spoke up about it to him. He decided the best choice of words he could yell were, "I make the most sales and I have the biggest dong, so you can all screw off." He was fired on the spot. Customers thought it was pretty funny though. Story 3. The company I work for is a contractor for a giant corporation, and we go to different stores to do work. This new guy we hired seemed normal at first, but it turned out he was a complete frickin' idiot. So one day he goes on site with one of the senior employees to shadow him. This genius thought that because we did work for the giant corporation, we could just eat anything off the shelves and from the refrigerators for free. Well, the employee saw this and was like, "What the hell are you doing? You need to pay," and the manager comes. This guy then started fighting with the manager, then got in his car after and drove off. Needless to say, his butt was fired the next day. Story 4. I used to manage a store in the mall. One of my employees, I'm pretty sure, was cheating on her husband with a mall security guard. I would come by on my days off and he would scurry out in a fluster. I never mentioned it, but the guy was coming by all the time to the point that it was keeping her from doing her job. Finally, we had a work meeting and I said in a very non-accusatory way something like this. I know it gets slow in here during the week and I'm guilty of it myself, but from now on I need everyone to keep personal visits to a minimum or during your lunch break. She stands up and starts screaming at me. How dare I accuse her? I'm a female dog, and she quits. She continued to call me and leave me harassing voicemails for a while too. Ooh, that deep-seated guilt really runs deep with her, huh? That outburst was 100% projection. For her husband's sake, I hope that he's better off now. Story 5. Tool and die shop owner here. One of our machinists would go out for lunch and slam back 3 to 4 beers every day. When I found out, I told him he can't drink beer at lunch. He said it was his time. And what he did at lunch was his business, not mine. The next day he came back from lunch smelling like beer. I let him go on the spot. A few years back he showed up in my office asking for his old job back. He said that he was an alcoholic back then and was sorry for his behavior. He was now sober and needed a job. I hired him on the spot and it worked out great for 5 or 6 years. Then he started drinking again and I had to let him go a second time. I have no idea how he's doing now, but I often wonder. He was a great machinist and a nice guy when he was sober. Story 6. I worked for a boutique hotel, small, cute, expensive AF, as an ops manager. Basically, unless the area manager had come in, I was the law. I get a frantic call on my downtime from an employee claiming our overnight guy tried to assault him. I have a sigh as the guy freaking out is notorious for being a drama queen. I load up the security camera on my home PC, go to the time frame, and oh my god. Our night guy legitimately lunged at his coworker and tried to strangle him. Luckily, a desk was between them and gave the victim time to bolt. Instantly felt like a dong for doubting him. Well, this is when I call in the area manager. We show up at the butt crack of dawn and speak with the dude who made the attack, and he claims he didn't do it. We show him the video and I crap you not. He responds with, "I don't recall the events of that evening." We fired him on the spot. What started the fight, you ask? Well, the victim had done extra work to make the attacker's shift easier. The attacker felt like this was an insult to his work ethic. Oh, and I got multiple reference requests from similar hotels asking for a good reference. I simply said I wasn't able to provide one, as legally that was all I could say. Story 7. I've told this story before, but it sticks with me. Years ago, like in the 90s, my husband worked for a small company. He did a little bit of everything, and one of his jobs, along with a coworker, was keeping all the computers running. Now, this was a sales-based company, so all of the salespeople had laptops for themselves. If there was an issue or problem, they'd bring them in to be looked at. So one day, one of the non-local sales guys was in for a meeting. He said, "Hey, my computer's running really, really slowly. Can you take a look at it?" My husband says, "Yeah, no problem." Sales guy leaves the computer and goes to whatever meeting he was off to. My husband and his colleague take a look and see the disk is nearly full, and figured that was slowing things down. They dig deeper and the computer is filled with adult content, like, we're talking filled with it. Stuff of all sorts, nothing illegal per se, but very, very close to it. Now mind you, the salespeople signed an agreement that their assigned computer was for business use only, not personal use. So we have a slight problem here. My husband and his colleague, not wanting to make a mountain out of a molehill, and not wanting the guy to lose his job over a fixable problem, just wiped the drive clean and reformatted it. Got things set up again and the computer was working great. The guy comes back the next day and my husband goes, "Hey, sales guy, We took a look at your computer. It was running slowly because the disk was nearly full with, personal files. So we wiped it clean, reformatted things, and you're good to go. Just a reminder, our company-issued computers are for business use only. So if you're looking for something for personal use, here's some relatively inexpensive options with a lot of storage. You can put whatever you want on it. Small investment for privacy, And with that, they gave him a printout list of some good, reasonably priced laptops he could purchase for himself. The sales guy just kind of mumbled something, grabbed his computer, and was on his way without so much as a thank you. Well, the guys figured that was that, but guess who was back 6 weeks later with a not working at all computer? Yep. Problem? Yeah, it was the same thing. They were done at this point. The two of them went straight to the president's office, showed her what was on the computer, well, enough to give her an idea, and explained what had happened previously. She was a very no-nonsense lady, so needless to say, by 3 p.m. that afternoon, the sales guy was no longer sales guy. What an idiot. Straight up, sounds like this guy just had an addiction. Clearly it impacted his everyday life, so by definition, addiction. It's either that or he really was just completely clueless. Can never quite tell. Either way, I hope he's figured stuff out for himself. Story 8. About a year ago, I hired a guy who was down on his luck. Went against my better judgment. Due to the nature of my business, I usually don't hire people that fit his profile. Out of shape, poor hygiene, etc. It wasn't long before I started hearing complaints from female employees and clients. Turns out he would often attempt to flirt with women, and when turned down, he would lose his mind. Call them terrible names and insults. Yeah, I don't tolerate that crap, so I gave him a very stern warning. The very next day, I found one of my sweetest female employees visibly upset. Upon inquiring, she said that the jerk had followed her home yesterday to make sure she got home safely, then showed up this morning to escort her to the office. She was genuinely scared. I called him into my office and told him to scram. He threatened to file a complaint with the Department of Labor for discrimination against, and I quote, men who have an innate need to protect women. Didn't matter, told him to beat it. And now I'm fighting the stupid claim with the DOL. Story 9. I used to do some consulting work and hired a woman to help out. Mostly clerical stuff and whatnot. I flew down to St. Thomas for a meeting and got a call from Sonatrol at 10:30 p.m. She had keys to my building but didn't know about the alarm. Basically, she and her boyfriend brought another couple down to have a four-way in one of my offices I had converted to a bedroom where I would crash if I worked late. So I called her. She answered mid-act and acted normal, albeit a bit tipsy. I talked about a few mundane details I needed to relay to her anyway, and then mentioned to make sure she was only ever at the office between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., since there was a silent alarm that would call me with the audio of activities in the building. When I got back into town, her keys were sitting on my desk. Story 10. Had a guy on a location fake an injury. Now, mind you, he did injure himself severely, accidentally, but that wasn't his plan. His plan was to fake a minor injury and get put on workers' comp. The problem was he screwed up how to do it and ended up actually hurting himself severely. Now, you would ask, how did you know he was trying to fake injure himself? Well, that's very easy to explain. We had a 20-minute tape of him hiding behind one of the trucks on the worksite practicing his fall. Then a written confession from friends saying that he'd been planning it since the day we hired him. Hey, if nothing else, this guy knows how to make a plan and set to it. So we have to give him at least 1 point, I think. Everything else, though, not looking so good. Story 11. Not my business, but my dad's. He hired predominantly people with criminal records, and literally all they had to do was inspect rental cars for damages. Just check them out as the cars left to the lot and keep their noses clean. You could do pretty much anything you wanted on your downtime with no complaints from my dad as long as he didn't get any complaints from the owners of the car lot. One day, one of the supervisors for the car lot I worked for walks out and asks me for my dad's number. Supervisor had caught a guy stealing gas from the property. He even had security camera footage of it happening. Dude was instantly fired. Story 12. Not a business owner, but at a previous job we had issues with food being stolen from the break room fridge. The company made a big stink about it and it kept happening, so they very obviously installed security cameras in the break room. Like huge freaking cameras in plain sight pointed at the fridge. And our bosses were very direct about, there is the camera. You really want to lose your job over eating someone's sandwich? A few days later, a guy gets fired for stealing food. Literally on camera, just grabbing people's lunch out of the fridge and eating it. Story 13. Don't own a business, but work on employee claims and lawsuits. I've told the story on here before. A guy filed a discrimination complaint against the company after he got fired for stealing hot dogs from the fridge. This warehouse, big company, this was not at my location, kept a stock of hot dogs for employee appreciation picnics, usually weekly cookouts. No one knew why they were disappearing, so announcements were made and all employees were asked to not eat the hot dogs, and if they wanted some, They could ask, but they couldn't have several packs. That didn't work, so warnings were announced. Finally, a camera was installed near the fridge and he got caught red-handed. He was practically inhaling them directly from the fridge by the pack. After he was fired, he filed a discrimination claim on the basis of disability due to his weight. I sent the response with a video of him eating the hot dogs. Also, he couldn't prove his weight was a disability under the ADA, and weight is not a protected class. We won that claim. Story 14. The one that instantly jumps to mind was the woman who was fired day 2 of a call center training course because she wouldn't stop touching herself. Not sure how she got through HR screening. This was for a wireless phone company too, not a chat line or anything. Edit. Since some people requested details, actually it was really somewhat sad. She was late 30s, early 40s, and I don't think it was an employment scam or anything of the like. More likely just a mental compulsion or drugs. It was really not that subtle, but done under a shawl/scarf thing draped over her lap. Politely and quietly asked to stop by the trainer, then stopped momentarily, but started up again 15 minutes later. Story 15. My dad owned his business working as a color corrector/editor. He had this one employee who had been there since day 1, and ended up becoming similar to an assistant manager. My dad owned that company for 10 plus years, and just recently he had to fire the assistant manager, because apparently he was telling employees and customers that my dad hates gays, people who aren't white, his kids, his whole family, he's a terrible person, etc. Basically driving all the business away, pushing my dad's company towards bankruptcy. Turns out he was a narcissistic sociopath. My dad's just sad his employees never trusted him enough to tell him about what this guy would say to them. It's honestly a little concerning that no one told him. Like, how long was he doing this? The whole time? Surely not. It would have been caught sooner. It must have been pretty recent. Seriously though, driving a business you work for to the ground just seems ill-advised in a lot of ways. I don't know where the logic lies here, but yeah, I don't see how this would help anyone. Story 16. My dad and I ran a business together cleaning out foreclosed homes for a real estate agency as I was finishing high school. I was a senior, so I got out at lunchtime and we would usually get a house done in half a day. Sometimes we'd get some bad ones, and we had a few guys that we would call to see if they wanted to make a quick $100 for a day's work. On my literal last day of class, my dad picked up one of our usual guys and got one house about 90% done by lunch. He was a pretty normal guy and we had no issues with him. The guy we paid to help my dad went out to the truck and came back into the house with a gun and robbed my dad of his wallet and took his keys and left in our truck. Funny thing is, my dad only had the cash he was about to give him an hour later for finishing the job. The state police got the guy's number from us and they told him some bogus story about how my dad was being investigated for not paying his workers, and if he would meet the police with the truck, they would get his statement and let him go. Idiot actually pulls up and gets arrested on the spot. He got 8 years in prison. Story 17. Obligatory, not a business owner, but my wife's cousin worked with me and her father at our work, landscaping, for a couple of months. He had previous experience and we needed the help, so we hired him, despite warnings to the owner from my father-in-law that he was a jerk. To name a couple of things: A. We were putting fresh mulch in one of the industrial parks that we maintained. He had me close the doors to the bed of the truck, after which he raised the bed so all the mulch would slide to the back. Except the doors weren't designed for that type of load and immediately sprang open. If they hadn't hit the ground while swinging open, they would have royally screwed up the cars on either side of us. He then proceeded to call the owner of the company and tell him what happened, placing all the blame on me for not closing the doors right. B. Took him on a paver job, and he insisted that he could cut pavers with our wet saw, except he didn't use gloves. So the material from the pavers being cut, which includes some nasty stuff, absolutely destroyed the skin on his hands, and he called out for the next 2 days because he couldn't move his fingers. And this wasn't the first time he made this mistake. C. Same paver job, which called for Belgian block to be installed along the driveway. He decided it would be a good idea to mix the mortar and the sand for the base on the owner's freshly paved driveway, and use it as he needed it. Except it rained the day he did so, and he ended up with a 3/4 ton block of what was essentially concrete in the middle of their, again, freshly paved driveway. D. On multiple occasions we got reports from the grass cutting crew that he went out with that he did nothing all day except sit in the truck, text his wife, and smoke cigarettes. He thought he could get away with this because neither myself nor the father-in-law were with him. Eventually he was fired, and we got a couple extremely nasty but entertaining phone calls from his wife calling all of us some choice names, while vowing we were no longer part of his family. Story 18. Not a business owner, but this happened to one of my coworkers. Guy was extremely nerdy, and this is from a self-admitting nerd, and absolutely obsessed with Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Literally the only things he would ever talk about, and would talk about them for as long as you'd let him. One day I'm on register, and I see him being dragged out of the store by cops in handcuffs. Turns out he had been shoplifting tons of playing cards of those above listed games, at least $500 worth, as our store policy was to let an employee get away with it up to that amount before busting them. I think because the charges stick harder or something. Story 19. I'm not a business owner, but I'm a student manager, aka I don't have the ability to fire someone, but I had to in this case. This one kid was trouble to say the least, and I asked him to go check the bathrooms to make sure they were clean/stocked. When he asked about the women's room, I just said to knock and to make sure nobody was in there. Apparently he banged on the door and screamed in his very deep voice, "Who in here? Everybody get out!" He then entered the bathroom where a poor little elderly woman was inside the stall and continued to bang on the stall yelling to get out. He was yelling so loud I actually heard him and went to investigate. The poor woman was whimpering and calling the police, and he was just the kind of person who had no idea how he came across. There were many weird issues, but this obviously topped the cake, and I told him he was done and needed to go home. The poor old woman was so upset that she refused to leave the bathroom and I had to call her son for her. Story 20. I sold Kirby vacuum cleaners for a day. We drove around in a van and knocked at doors. The driver owned a franchise or something, so he would come in and close the deal. I sold one on my first day. I called him and he came in and asked the buyer if there was anything he didn't like about the deal. Of course, the buyer said the price was a little high, so the franchise owner knocked off my whole commission. His reasoning was that if I sold a couple more, I would be in some higher commission rate or something. I said screw that and took the tea home. Hounded him for weeks. He finally gave me the money after I showed up at his house at 1:30 a.m. Screw him. What a jerk. Story 21. Mobile home parks. Guy was hired on day 0. Day 1. His, 18M, mom calls and says he got carried away with celebrations, holiday, and woke up and found himself in jail. Day 4, he's out of jail and shows up to work for the first time. Day 16. Advised me if he ever doesn't show up for work, call the jail. If he's there, then there is a roll of 20s in his drawer labeled bail fund, please get him out. Day 30. Took some Xanax he had obtained somehow without telling us. I give him the job to use the tractor's front end loader and load my dump trailer with the debris we're cleaning. As he tries to dump it, Xanax kicks in. He ran into the same house 5 times with the tractor, finished the job and parked the tracks inside the barn mostly. Day 40. 3 a.m. a tenant calls about the maintenance guy having fire and rescue at his house, lived on site. Evidently he got drunk. While vacuuming behind the couch, he managed to flip it over on him. He couldn't get out from under it but could reach his cell phone and called fire and rescue to come get him out and, well, they did. Day 51. Gets drunk. He's a minority, by the way, and he dresses up in a KKK outfit and starts walking through the town and the park in his outfit with a shovel for a flagpole and Confederate flag on it as his Halloween costume. Somehow makes it home covered in eggs. Day 71. Alcohol-based termination. Now he's doing well and has a steady job, etc. Probably the funnest person to work with and very productive, believe it or not. Okay, from like day 30 onwards, how did this man keep this job for any longer? Running into the same house 5 times with a tractor should be grounds for termination, right? Like, this guy must have been really good at other aspects of the job, or he would have been out of there. Story 22. Narrator coming in just before story 22 here. This one, huge. It goes on for a while. Be prepared. Of course, not a business owner, but I was shift lead for lifeguards and watched our manager fire a trashy lifeguard. So, at the water park I worked at, we had this girl I'll call Brenda. Brenda had a consistent habit of being rude to customers. She was not an ounce kinder to her peers with whom she worked. Of note, she had done the following. Cussed out a manager for not giving her the easy spots for the first shift of the day so she could sleep. Countless noted incidents of being rude to guests. I once witnessed her cussing out and banning, even though she couldn't, several teenagers for minor infractions. Every lead and guard wanted to fire her, but because our park required at least 100 guards to staff the park on any given day, and this year we only had 196 guards hired, this was problematic at best, because minors who make up the overwhelming bulk of the lifeguard force cannot work more than 40 hours a week. This would work well if we were open Monday to Friday, but closing a water park on Saturdays and Sundays during summer is an awful business decision, and so the park remained open 7 days a week, leading to significant deficits in staffing. This led to people either not showing up or trading shifts at the last minute, screwing up the schedule even more. Add to the fact our boss was committed to ensuring our staff could live normal teen lives, i.e. have time off, we had staffing problems out the wazoo. Our staffer was constantly working to negotiate a schedule on a tight deadline. Brenda did not assist this in any way. Brenda liked to arrive up to 45 minutes after opening, just the minimum to not get a strike on her record. At first we punished her for it, but eventually we stopped because the manager never got around to actually firing her, and she was always more than happy to put up an argument that would make the Jersey Shore cast scuttle away. Our scheduler thus did what she could at our insistence. She put her on 2 8-hour days per week at most. People would pay others a bribe to avoid shifts with her. Some people actually memorized her ID number so they could switch shifts in advance. At first, the excuses were to not work with her, which had to be rejected. But people eventually had a laundry list of activities, appointments, and other events that magically went away when people were switched. Our scheduler actually had a list of people who consistently did not care. Well, one day, Brenda came about 45 minutes late as per usual, and since she was scheduled in my area, I was forced to compensate by adjusting the positions of the guards and removing people from non-necessary positions, which the guards enjoy as a brief respite from their demanding rotations, until a replacement can be found. I scorn this day, for I'm a cursed man, it would seem. Only 2 more weeks, I would tell myself. Then we get another batch of about 45 guards and Brenda is getting canned. She has no idea. Anyway, Brenda arrived. She got coffee at Starbucks and breakfast at McDonald's. I'm quite angry now. During that last hour, I've been trying to find a replacement. She takes a position and the rotation finally can proceed at its normal pace with all the stops. All seems well. Not so. At around 11:45, she's at the top of one of the rides, and this black family comes to the top of the ride and prepares to ready themselves. The ride, by its nature, requires a sort of mini lecture to learn how to ride. The guards are trained to give a demonstration and to assist anyone who requests it. She apparently gave her spiel and the family didn't understand it, because she had, as the family later told me, did a craptastic job at it. When they asked her to politely repeat it, she did, but before she was about to push the release button, she said these words. I had to read the reports at the end of the day just to verify this is real life, folks. Fricking slurs. Can't pay attention to a fricking word I say. Everyone in line heard it. Zero attempt was made to conceal it. It wasn't muttered. It was stated bluntly. The family was livid, understandably so. But Brenda does nothing to save face. In fact, she doubled down. She went full Jerry Springer, supposedly raising her arms up in defiance, daring everybody who heard it to find a manager, calling them all stupid fricking slurs. The family came down to the ride and found me within 15 seconds, standing around at the break table eating my lunch. They approached me and we exchanged some heated pleasantries. We would later receive more than 6 reports of the incident from various parties. Thank God this was before cell phones were really popular. After placating our customers somewhat, passing a charisma check and realizing what had happened, on top of directing away a few others who wanted to file reports, and after realizing, not difficult, who committed this wretched act, I come to the realization that the situation was far, far above my pay grade. What am I supposed to do? Apologize and give Brenda yet another stern warning and send her home and send this family on their way? Yeah, like it'll work. We're really screwed. One of our uniformed members just used a racial slur to a black family, then told everyone nearby she didn't care and encouraged people to find managers, telling them they were too freaking stupid and powerless to stop her from behaving that way. My head was spinning. Is this real life? I figured Brenda would get fired for trying to fight someone, but this was different. I decided the best thing to do is give this family a 72-ounce portion of sweet revenge with front row seats. Normally, we would send the family away and fire her quietly. In hindsight, that might have been the more professional thing to do. But alas, nothing soothes the angry soul like a paradoxically hot bowl of justice. Me? I'm finished with the BS. No lies, no excuses. If she isn't canned, I'm going to seriously question if I still want to work there. I'm not getting involved. I radio our manager and tell him what's going on. He comes down 5 minutes later with 2 security guards. He actually agrees with my theories on hot bowls of revenge for once, and so he's adamant on letting the family see the spectacle he is soon about to create, all to let them know in the grandest way possible, we don't put up with that kind of BS. He has to act. The park's reputation is on the line. No more ignoring what everyone was telling him to do. I grab a lifeguard to replace Brenda, and the whole lot of us go up. It's not even hard to pull one from the break table. Most know exactly what's going on. They can hear me chatting with the family and beg to come with, all to have the honor of being the one who will witness it all and tell the others that it happened. The thing many disgruntled guards fantasized about would now happen, and in such a grand manner to boot. I'm excited, perhaps even giddy. The guards will sing songs of this day. Oh, if only I had a camera. But alas, the guards know her ID number by heart, and once they see her number off the rotation sheets, they will know it's not a rumor. Our manager tries to coerce an apology out of Brenda, but she just plays us off as pranksters, telling us we're female dogs that don't have the balls to fire me, even though we've basically called the line and removed as many people as possible from earshot. When she realizes we're not joking, she tells us that she is one of the most popular lifeguards in the park, and recounts a flawless service record. I refute that easily, and our head manager gives her one last chance to leave the park gracefully. Our black family rolls their eyes in annoyance. Nobody buys her ruse, and everybody just waits for the meltdown. Predictably, she refuses to comply and continues berating us, telling us she will continue working as a stellar lifeguard. Eventually, she realizes she's in trouble. So she does the only rational thing a person can do. She takes a tube from the ride and lobs it and hits our manager, knocking him on his feet to be caught by one of the guards. The guards attempt to seize her, but she makes a mad dash down the slide with but a half-second to spare, nearly taking one of the more agile and enthusiastic guards with her. If it were not for the $600 radio on his belt, he would have given chase. The guards head to the bottom expecting to catch her there, but in her one tactically cunning move so far, she escapes out of the slide, which is open on the top, and climbs down a support beam into some foliage. Unfortunately, her near-successful escape attempt is foiled not 5 minutes later, when she is spotted in her car attempting to go out the gate. Not like there would be much she could do. I radioed the lead guard and they verified her car was still in the lot. Everybody knew about her '98 Corolla, she bragged about it constantly. She got through the first gate somehow and they closed the second one, putting a squad car over at the gate, effectively penning her in like a cow. The family walked away laughing and satisfied, and I went to the top of another ride and saw her get arrested from 300 yards away. For the first time ever, I felt bad for her. I tried to talk her down, to let her save some face. OP, people like that have no face to save. They think they can do no wrong, too. So they don't even think that their reputation or whatever is going to get worse because their own self-image is just sky high for no reason. It's a pretty, bold move to call your patrons slurs, and then to act like you did nothing wrong and that you can get away with it because people like you, apparently. Don't know where she got that idea. This woman was living on a different plane of existence from us. I think that much is clear. Anyway, that is all the stories we have for today. I'm sure some of you have some stories about people getting fired, maybe not business owners, but hey, half the people in this thread weren't either, so who cares? For now though, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.